My name is Katie Walsh. I'm so pleased to be here with you this afternoon. I'm a film critic here in LA, and I'm so excited, looking forward to a wonderful conversation about this very special film with the film's stars and creators. So please help me welcome Andy Samberg. Andrea Riseborough. And the film's producer and star, Kate Winslet. Hello, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here today. What a remarkable story, this Lee Miller, this remarkable woman, remarkable story. Kate, I know you've been working on this film for a long time. Can you talk about origins? How, was this a project that started with you, or how did you come to the story of Lee Miller?
Is that working? Hello.
It is, right?
Thank you all so much for being here. So the project did start with me, and it all started because I have some friends who work in an auction house that sells interesting items of furniture, and they called me and they said, okay, there's this incredible table that's come in, and they know how much I love to cook and share meals with family and so on. And I said, well, tell me about it. And they said, it's a table that was owned in the home of the Penrose family, Roland Penrose, his sister, and their cousins, and it was a kind of a holiday home. And Lee Miller spent time in that house when she and Roland had just met, and she would cook and prepare food at this table, and they would share these meals with Picasso and Max Ernst and Paul Edouard and some of the people that you've seen in this film. And Lee was the one who would kind of do the hosting. And so I got this table, and it arrived at my house, and it's beautiful, old, and you can really feel the history in it. And I sat down, I put my hands on it, and I thought, my God, Lee Miller sat at this table. I wonder why no one's made a film about her. And 9 years later, I think I probably know why no one's made a film about her. Because it was so unbelievably hard. But the first thing I did was to go and meet her son, Anthony. He actually only lives a couple of hours from where I do, and he was standing in the driveway of his home as I pulled up, and he had his arms open like this, and I got out of the car and I walked towards him, and he said, my God, I have to tell you that I've always thought if ever there was a film made about my mother, that you would maybe play her.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it, and from that moment on I felt a real sense of duty and responsibility to him, because he had such a complicated relationship with her. It was not easy for her to be a mother in the state that she was in just after the war, and he describes it as a caustic relationship. And then it wasn't until much later, in 1977, just after she had died, that he discovered in the attic of their home boxes full of 60,000 negatives and prints of everything his mother had done during the war, and he never knew, and she never spoke of it. But I wanted to make the film that lifted Lee out of the male gaze. Because if I Googled her in 2015, it would say, and it would do probably even now, she's described as the ex-lover and muse of Man Ray. I know, and the former Vogue cover girl, ex-model, these really almost belittling, infantilizing labels that had been stuck on her and stayed. And it just sort of wasn't okay with me, because that was a little moment in time in her 20s. She didn't even like being a model, and she was already taking photographs. She had learned photography from her father, and that was truly what she wanted to do. But I saw that this decade in her life that we cover in our film was the decade when Lee became Lee. It was the most interesting, dynamic period of her life, and what she did to be that visual voice for the victims of conflict against all odds was so extraordinary to me, and I couldn't handle the fact that people might never know that about her, and that there may be some of you here who've never heard of Lee Miller. And my hope was that for those people, they might meet her this way, the right way, for who she truly was and what she did for history.
So I think it's fascinating that the film was directed by Ellen Kuras, who was the cinematographer on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So you've obviously known her for a long time. I mean, did you recruit her as a, it's so fascinating to have a female photographer, be directing a film about this female photographer and this idea of the male gaze. I mean, how did Ellen, come on board as well?
So I did about 5 years almost myself in the development process, bringing the writers on board and really kind of working out, honestly, the beginning, middle and end of the story. It was very clear quite quickly that we couldn't make, I didn't want to make a straight up biopic. I wanted it to be something that really distilled her truth. And so once that process was kind of done with and the script was ready to go out for financing, which is a whole other fucking story, but it was clear at that point that I had been so immersed in the archive with Tony Penrose and all of Lee's work and her photographs and her clothes and her camera and her personal letters and diaries, etc. This was a woman's woman, and it would not have sat right in my soul morally to have asked a man to direct this. And Ellen had, obviously, she has a decades-long, much revered career as a cinematographer, and she had started directing television, but she had yet to do a feature film. And we had remained friends since Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that's when she and I started having a conversation about it. And as you just said, it made sense. Ellen's skill set is visually telling stories, creating that narrative, and that's, of course, precisely who Lee was and what she did, and so it just aligned.
Andy and Andrea, how did this project come to you, or how did you end up playing these roles? Had you heard of these characters before you got the script?
I had not heard of Audrey. I didn't know about Audrey. I knew Lee Miller's work very well and loved it. I think it was one of the most. I'm so grateful for having gone through the process, because getting to know Audrey was one of the most wonderful, intimate, friendly, warm hugs that I've ever had, kind of getting to know a character. And it's really interesting bringing somebody to life who's not affected by the zeitgeist. Often when you play an icon, there are so many opinions about a person, but really it was like spending a very intimate time with Audrey and then sharing this person with the world. And she was a really unusual character. She was quite bare bones and utilitarian and left-leaning and quite a right-leaning world politically at vogue at the time, and just wanted in every way to give Lee Miller a voice as a war correspondent, and just a very interesting woman of a lot of substance. And it came to me through Kate, who FaceTimed me.
But we didn't know each other. We didn't know each other at all. I just managed to get her number. That's how I kind of put the film together, was like finding out people's numbers and just ringing around.
You cold FaceTime?
Absolute bloody pleasure. I mean, who doesn't want to be called FaceTime like Kate Winslet? I was in the middle of shooting Matilda, I think, and just immediately, firstly, she was just such a gorgeous human being, and was completely lovely from the first moment we spoke. I felt so normal, for want of a better word, and comfortable, and then she told me about this project, and I mean, honestly, you could have asked me to do anything. I could have, maybe Alex's part, I could have played Alex's part. But any part, and I would have said yes. But I was so happy it was Audrey.
Did you receive a cold FaceTime?
I mean, I never would have picked it up. Even if you're Kate, who we all love Kate, but that's crazy. Yeah, like that comes up, you're like, okay, this is someone's butt dial. No one does that. I was told that they were interested in me maybe reading the script and reading for it, which came at the exact moment I said, I actually maybe should read for it. Like me and my reverend, like we said it at the same time, because obviously this is different tonally for me than anything I've done before. And I wanted to make sure that Kate and everyone working on it felt like I was going to come in and not disrupt the vibe, basically. Which, you know, I'm good at it, I've said this. And so they sent me the script and I read it and I Googled David Sherman and I was like, oh, okay. I see who he is. Obviously I look like him, which helps. And as I read it, I mean, to answer the earlier question too, I did not know a lot about Lee Miller. I had seen the photograph in the bathtub, and now I was always like, oh, that's one of those famous World War II photos. But I never took the deep dive to figure out, you know, who she was and where it came from or any of that. And so at the same time of being fascinated by the script and being like, whoa, this movie's going to be really incredible and heavy and important, getting to know David Sherman and realizing I really admired him and that I did have something to offer in playing him, and I had a lot of connective tissue in my own life to him. You know, my family's from New York. My father was a photographer. My grandfather, you know, was involved in all of what was going on over in World War II. My family fled during it. You know, there's a lot of history in my family that immediately made me understand what the movie was and what it was for. You know, and so. We talked. Kate could not have been nicer. I was like, she is really in charge of this movie. This is awesome. So hands-on, reached out, so encouraging. I put myself on tape first, right, and I sent. And then we did a Zoom with Ellen and read scenes, and we chatted through it a little bit, and she was like, try it this way, try it this way. It was like, it was fun, it was acting. And at the end of it, she was like, thank you so much, that was so great. We'll be in touch.
But I am going to just add this because this is really important. So Andy had expressed a concern, not a concern, it was a fear. He was afraid that audiences wouldn't be able to move beyond seeing him as the comedian. And he was worried that people would be waiting and expecting him to just do something funny at some point. And we talked a lot about that, and before you got off that Zoom, I said, actually, Andy, just before you go, just do one where you don't do anything with your face. And he was like, it didn't seem to kind of quite make sense how it was perfectly possible to not move your face and still convey the same level of power, as you see very clearly that he does, particularly in the scene after Hitler's bathtub. And he did this take where he did nothing with his face, and it was absolutely unbelievable. And I was like, yeah, he's an actor, give this guy the job straight away. But it was really, really phenomenal, honestly, and you're so fucking good in the film.
Thanks, buddy. You did FaceTime me from underneath a baggage cart at the airport to tell me I got the part.
No. I didn't want anyone else to make that call.
You have the strangest FaceTime of anyone, maybe in history. It's a short history, granted. It's new tech.
Forging a path. For all three of you, I mean, there probably was not a lot to necessarily work with to create these characters. I mean, you can do research, but it's not like there's necessarily recordings or interviews that, especially
there was a lot.
Oh, there was. I was going to ask about the materials.
We almost had too much.
Okay.
I mean, it was. I mean, in the archive, there is Lee's camera kit. There's actually Davy's camera kit as well. There's all of the photographs, the prints, everything. You know, properly personal things. Clothes, really. Her uniform is in there, which I believe me, I know the measurement between the buttons. And we had Anthony Penrose, and Anthony had met Audrey, and he had also had a very close friendship with Davy.
Okay.
And actually, Tony Penrose himself will say that Davy became a very, very significant figure in his life up to the point before Davy died. So we had so much, and it was utterly incredible. And even throughout the process of putting the film together, they would find more things in the archive that they just hadn't been able to correctly document, because there was just so much. And one of the things that they discovered, and Amy, Lee's granddaughter, who is a couple of years younger than me and helps run the archive, she called me one day and she said, "Kate, I think you better come over." I said, "What is it?" She said, "We found something, you just aren't going to believe what this is." So I said, "Okay." So I drove to Farley's, which is where the house is, where the museum is. This gone off. There you go, it's back on. And she said, "Here you go, look at this." And I walked into the room, and there was a box, and it just said on the side, "Rags." And I opened the box, and she was giggling, and I said, "What is it?" Not rags at all. Lee's clothes that I have seen and are very available to see in so many famous, iconic images of her. They were all right there. And so we just laid them all out on the floor, and our costume designer, Michael O'Connor, came right down and he copied everything. He was able to digitally recreate all of those fabrics, and so every single thing that we have in the film really is entirely authentic, and it had to be. It just had to be. Not least because we had those resources at our fingertips, but because there would not have been any point making a film about a woman who refused to hide from the truth and to have faked one part of it. So we had all of that, and we just lapped it all up.
And when you're working with like printed materials or clothing items, like things that they had, like you all do sort of very distinct voices. And how do you sort of come to your voices for all three of you, for your characters?
Well, we did all have, we were able, there were recordings.
Oh, there were recordings, okay.
There were recordings. There's one publicly available recording of Lee, only one, and it is a radio interview that she gives. And of course, back in those days, radio was scripted. So everything felt very rehearsed and staged, and Lee is really putting on her best not drunk smoker voice. And so she really just kind of talks like that. "Why, I'm so delighted to be here, and my goodness, what a beautiful day it is." I thought, oh my God, I can't speak like that, that's absolutely terrible.
Right.
I mean, there's no way anyone's going to believe that. But then there was another recording that Anthony had, a family recording, and it's Lee making an old wireless recording with Anthony, who was a boy at the time, and some other family members, to send to her father, who lived in upstate New York, and they were living in England at the time. And it's just, "Well, hello, Daddy. This is me, Lee.
Wow.
Can you hear the sound of that whiskey pouring into my glass?" And I just thought, okay, there is so many lives lived in that voice, so many cigarette smokes, so many heartbreaks, so many whiskey sours, and the life that she had lived really resonated in her body, and who Lee was as a woman was absolutely reflected in her voice and in her physical self. How free she was with her affection, how comfortable she was in her own skin, and given that she had experienced such an extraordinary trauma as a child, by right she could have hated men, but somehow she didn't. She would not let that define her, and she was born with her eyes wide open, and she lived life at full throttle, and paid the price, because the PTSD was so significant and haunted her truly for the rest of her life, until she had a facelift and reinvented herself as a cordon bleu chef in her 60s, which is true. That's not yes, she had many lives. Did you know that?
We didn't do like a Marvel post-credits scene?
Someone will do a 12-part. Someone will do a 12-part series about her at some point, because her life was so vast.
I mean, that is what is so interesting about this film and about her, is like, you read the Wikipedia and it's like, there's so much that happens before the start of the movie. So, she's teaching photography, she's Man Ray's assistant, and you can see it in your performance in the sense that she's making asides about Man Ray or about whatever, used to be a model, but it's there's so much. This could be a 12-part series or something because she has lived so many lives and continued to, obviously.
She absolutely did. But you had a brilliant recording, didn't you?
Did you have a recording of David?
Yeah.
Yeah, well after the events for Sherman in the movie, he did a radio interview because he became editor of Life magazine, and he was putting out a best of Life photo book that he had curated, and so I got to listen to basically a full hour of him talking.
Oh wow.
And I was struck immediately. I already sort of touched on this, but I was like, oh, he sounds like my uncles and my grandfather a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's that New York from that era thing.
Yeah.
But it's also my family's from Long Island, half of them, and it's very laid back. It's no nonsense. It's very talking about the other photojournalist. Oh yeah, she was great. She had the best shots, so we put them in. It was there's just no pomp to any of it. He was just right down the middle, no BS. When it was good, and it was really helpful just to get his spirit, not even to try and be I'm going to try and sound exactly like him in this exact way, because you can only take that so far, and that's not what people are going to be looking for anyway, because there's really just that one interview, and like you were saying about the character, it's not like playing Liberace, where you don't sound like him. It's more just you want to do right by that person and what you believe they stood for and get their essence.
The essence of their character. Well, that comes through so much in that introduction to the character, where he's just holding up the light, being helpful, or the mirror. There's such an easy rapport between you two the whole time, which is really lovely to watch. Well, I think we have time for one or two questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? All the way up in the back, very back corner. Yes, you.
Great, yep. I really admire the O. Henry twist ending that you did. Because here, you think he's a reporter, Anthony's a reporter interviewing the lead, and as it progresses, it turns out to be it's your son. And then you vanish, so it was him going through his memories. And I thought that was a great touch.
Thank you. It was Liz Hanna, one of our writers, who we started working very intensely with Anthony at one point. And she turned to me and she said, this is part of the story, is his story and his journey, and the fact that after his mother's death, he really did go through every single image, every single letter, everything to do with her life. And in his own words, he said, this woman who I thought was just a stupid old drunk, she suddenly came to life for him in a way that she had never been when she was actually alive. And for him, actually the process of us making this film has given him extraordinary closure. And he's been so wonderful and so grateful, and he was there for me during the shoot, and there were some scenes that we had to do, namely the scene when Lee reveals to Audrey what had happened to her as a child. And there have been many different versions of that scene that were written over the years, as there so often is with any screenplay. And it absolutely worked, and it landed. But I knew that I was going to stop looking at the scene because I had to have it feel as though it was just tumbling out of me when we came to shoot it. And I always knew that the night before I would phone Tony, and he said, it's tomorrow, isn't it? And I said, yeah, it is, yeah. And he said, okay, how did you feel? And I said, well, I'm quite scared. And I said, we're going to write it now. And he said, okay. And I said, okay, let's go through it. Tell me again. Tell me. Where were you? And where was it? And this and who? And we went through all the details. And we wrote the words together on a sheet of A4 paper. And then I just quickly learned it, and then I went to work the next day, and I said to Kate Solomon, my producing partner who's standing over there, I said, I said, Tony and I rewrote the scene. She went, okay, great. She said, do you want to give it to me and I'll go and print it out? I said, actually, no, I'm just going to do it. And I was so afraid. I was so also ready to do it because it was quite far along in the shoot at that point. And we had also filmed the cutting of the Dachau negative scene that same day, which was hell on earth. And because that also really happened, it's a real scene. And when the cameras rolled and we were shooting the scene of me and Andrea on the steps, I just sort of just did it. And it was fucking awful, wasn't it? It was absolutely, it was just terrible because Lee never told. And she had really been told by her mother, you must never ever say. And in prepping for the film, I met so many survivors of sexual assault who told me that they had carried the shame all their lives because they had been told you never tell. That generation, you know, there's something about that generation who were absolutely silenced in the face of horror. And I believe really that injustice is the thing that drove Lee through her life and motivated her to go to war, to seek out the truth. She had the ability to spot evil at a mile off. And she just was not going to let the truth not be told on the part of others. And that's why we had to give her voice in the film, just that once. And if it hadn't have been for Tony being so pivotal to the whole experience, for all of us, but especially me, we wouldn't have had those words. And so I'm so glad that you appreciated that framing, because it really made the movie a movie, I think, actually, in the end. I spoke for so long then. I'm so sorry.
You were hanging on your every word. I think there's a question right here.
I love the movie, and I didn't think I was going to see this. I want to know how much this character permeated you as it did to me.
I mean, now that I'm doing the press for the film, I still can't believe we've actually made the film, and I don't have to keep making the film anymore. I mean, honestly, I'm serious. And I have also pictured the moment. We would talk about this on set. We said, oh my God, we're going to be doing these Q&As. We're going to be talking, I'm going to actually do press for the film. It's going to come out. I'm like, I still really can't believe it. And I think because of producing it as well, that journey sort of hasn't really stopped. Because of course we've got territories all over the world that we have to do things for and be ready for, and so that job has continued. And now I'm having this almost moment of pause and really being able to talk about what it was to play her, and it was unbelievable. And there are things about her that are in me that I think and I hope will actually always be in me now, because she was so inspiring. And her ability to live life with resilience and compassion and power, the way she redefined femininity 80 years ago, that's how I always want to live my life. That's how I am with my friends, that's how we're raising our daughters. And having your eyes wide open and not judging people, and kindness, that was Lee. And it would be impossible not to carry some parts of her for a long time, I'm sure.
Andy and Andrea, do you have any things from your characters that you're gonna, continue to resonate on or take with you that you learned about these people?
Certainly, and when you play a character, it's changing in every way, and you come out on the other side of it and think, I feel like a completely different being. There are a few funny moments during the process for me, like when I went first dinner with Tony, and it was the first time he'd seen me, and I remember him looking and asking Kate, is she playing? And Kate saying, that's, she's playing Audrey. And I was like, yep, it's me, the small child who looks feeble. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. I think something that I'll really keep is Audrey was able to include everyone. She was politically very different to everybody else in the world that she was in, and she was so generous and such an advocate of good work. And she'd been through so very much herself, personally, especially in relationship to men. And I think that just generosity, that sort of tacit understanding that that women have between one another, always being open to that, to everyone, not just with women, but to everybody, to remain open to allowing people to be the absolute best that they can be, I think that was one of her great qualities.
I mean, I learned how to drive the Army Jeep.
Put that on your resume.
Yeah, and like I know that seems like a light answer, but it took a lot of work because I had never driven a stick before, and it was a real pain in the ass to drive. And I was made fun of a lot. I'm not naming names, Kate Winslet. My ability to drive the Army Jeep. And so I'm proud of myself for that. And entertainment. I would say the thing I will hold the most from the experience of making the movie and playing Sherman is having gone through just reenacting the things that he and me saw. Like, I've taken classes about the Holocaust in college. I've been told about it by my family. We've all seen movies about it. And being in those scenes where you are doing your job by letting it feel as real as you possibly can is not something I'll shake ever.
Yeah.
Even though you know it's not real in that moment, you know it was real.
Yeah.
And it really happened. A lot like how it looks and feels while you're doing it, and it's so awful that I don't want to say like changed how I felt about anything, because I always knew it was horrible and I always knew it affected my family and so many people, so many millions and millions of people. But personally, to have walked through it, amplified it to a place I had never expected. It really did impact me.
Well, it's a remarkable film, and I'm so glad that it will be in theaters next week. It's for a long journey, and it's coming to its fruition. So thank you all for being here.